Hi, everybody. This is Dan Stolbarger. It's time for our weekly Middle East update. It's the week of January 15th. Reminder, make sure you grab the PDF PowerPoint that accompanies this presentation. You can get that at our website at holygroundexplorations.com, or if you're watching on YouTube, there should be a link in the introduction to this week's update. So with that in mind, let's take a quick look at what we call our news bites. As you know, it's been a very interesting week. We've had big tech, whether it's Twitter, Apple, Google, Facebook, you name it, very much involved in what's going on in our world today, our First Amendment rights, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Trump obviously is going to need to find a new Twitter replacement. Don't be surprised if he builds out his own platform in the near future. We always look at COVID, especially in relationship to Israel, because we can't wait to get back there. We can't wait for the skies to be open. And the Israeli Health Ministry expects that 5.2 million Israelis will be fully vaccinated by late March. There's goodbyes that are going on right now. The ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, he told the Knesset that Israel should not seek immediate confrontation with Biden regarding Iran, but should instead ask the new administration to begin dialoguing, not just with Israel, but with other Arab countries, especially the United Arab Emirates. We're going to have to take a wait and see approach on the new administration's dealings with Iran, but it is a major concern, obviously, to Israel, as well as, I think, to all believers. Recently, there were 18 airstrikes that were carried out in Syria by Israel, and these are on the sort of Syrian, the eastern side, the Syrian-Iraqi border, and dealing with munitions and etc. that obviously are pouring into Syria from Iran. But there were 40 people that were killed and as many injured in airstrikes over the last week. As we kind of get into our main articles, one of the things that, a lot of people are saying, are you concerned about January 20th? And my answer is, yes, I am, but not for the reasons that you might think. I have a feeling that with everything that's taken place, that we'll be relatively in control of demonstrations, etc., on the inauguration day. But what my concern is, Israel has red lines, and Iran is moving to enrich uranium up to 20% purity. And according to Israeli intelligence, when you get to that point, it's the most significant step towards the acquisition of a nuclear bomb. And so the big question is, will Israel allow this to take place, or will there be a preemptive strike? And if so, before the 20th. So eyes and ears wide open in regards to all of this. We did mention COVID in Israel. Do you realize that some 700,000 doses of the vaccine this last Sunday arrived at the Ben Gurion airport? It's called Operation Back to Life. And to receive at the airport was the President Rivlin as well as Bibi Netanyahu. Accordingly, the Jewish state is on course to become the first country in the world to fully inoculate all of its citizens. And again, we've mentioned some of the numbers, but it's coming. And the skies will be opening. We just still are not sure when. And then back to this sort of big tech. You know, it's sort of George Orwell's 1984, with Trump being permanently banned from Twitter. And keep in mind, this was last Friday due to, quote, the risk of further incitement of violence. That's why it took place. And then over the weekend, Twitter deleted thousands of accounts posting content relating to QAnon and other far-right conspiracy theories. Apple and Google Play suspended Parler. There's some talk of them suspending Telegram as well. A lot of our friends are looking for alternative sites to make sure that their information can be distributed, that people can receive it. As far as Twitter goes, we read that Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, Caroline Glick, good friend of ours, Amir Savate, have all voluntarily sort of left Twitter. Who knows at this point in time what just tomorrow holds, but I do know who holds the key to tomorrow. The Trump dilemma. You know, the more they block him, the greater, I believe, his support will be. 74 million people, once Trump was deleted, in a sense, from Twitter, removed. Actually, it was 88 million followers. Took away their subscriptions to Twitter or using Twitter. But yeah, here's the crazy thing, is that the Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran, who spews hatred, who denies the Holocaust, and calls for radical intervention, the hatred of the USA, they're still allowed a position, Facebook, Twitter, or whatever. It's just it's a crazy time in which we live. And yet, because the more they block him, Newsmax has indicated that Trump's approval rate, despite what took place on January 6th, is actually increasing. It's over 51% at this particular time. As we look at those events, I think what's troubling, and I think for all of us, it was troubling, disheartening, a gut punch. It reminded me of an embassy in Iraq or whatever that was being overrun. There are movies shot about this, and it was our capital. So there's no excuse whatsoever for this type of violence. But one of the things that was greatly disturbing to me was the presence of white anti-Semitic forces. You know, I've given you some of the t-shirts. We talk a lot about the rise of anti-Semitism into this day. And look at these shirts, Camp Auschwitz, or the 6MWE, which stands for 6 million was not enough. There is a disgusting reference to the Holocaust in the midst of all this. And that's why this whole thing always has that sort of demonic root to it. But we should not be surprised, because this is the seedbed of our war. It's a spiritual war that's going on, principalities. And so again, the church today, we must wake up. We must go back to the Word of God. We must be devoted to the Bible to understand, what does the Bible say about all of these things? And what stand? Where do we plant our flag? Okay? When opposition comes, what will we do? Turn and run, stick our heads in the ground, or do we take a stand? Well, I could go on and on about that. This is not the time and place for that, but let me remind you that we have a weekly Bible study. We call it an old-fashioned Bible study. We're going through the book of, you guessed it, Revelation. It's all on our YouTube page. Right now, we just completed this week the last of the 7 churches. We finished with Laodicea, And next week, good jumping in point at this time, we will begin with chapter 4. After these things, join us in this study. Make sure that your friends, family, people at church, get them signed up for our KFIR global ministry, our community. It's free. Website, holygroundexplorations.com. Sign up. Well, as I said, there's goodbyes going on in Israel. And David Friedman, he's had the ear of the president throughout his tenure. He's considered instrumental in bringing about important gains to Israel. But as he's kind of reminisced and gone back over the last 4 years, he's talked about the extraordinary relationship that we've had, but he's highlighted, we've given you pictures of this, the accomplishments, the greatest accomplishments for Friedman was the moving of the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Very significant. Concern. This next slide is the pre-67 borders, a complete redo, deja vu, I guess you would say. But just before President-elect Joe Biden takes office, right now there's a scurrying about with Egypt and Germany and France, the so-called, the people that are involved in wanting to further push forward a negotiated plan for a two-state solution. The hope that we had with Kushner's plan was that it scrapped everything in the past that didn't work, never had a chance of working, and at least infused new ideas. Here it's going to go back to the same old. They're going to want to talk about pre-1967 borders. They're going to be talking about giving up the biblical heartland, splitting Jerusalem. Let me tell you right now, it will never work. So get ready, because you're going to start hearing this all over again. Now, the sources that we use for this presentation, about 15 to 20 different sources, some believers, some messianic, some center left, some center right. This is a far right. Slide number 11 talks about the anti-Israel presidency that's coming. This is a view of boots on the ground Israelis, not believers, but what they see coming. And I'm going to let you read that for yourself because we're running out of time. But again, it kind of goes along with the pre-67 borders. But understand that the Obama's administration's view on Israel, okay, the most anti-Israel administration. Remember, Biden was the vice president. So what can we expect? I hope differently, but I'm not holding my breath. You can take a look at that. There's last article here I call Palestinian math. Very simply, Mahmoud Abbas is going on his 17th year of his 4-year term. Let that one sink in. And then just a reminder, Revelation, we're going through it. There's the address here of our YouTube. I hope you join us. Time's sort of up for this week. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I don't know if I want to use the word fearful, but I will say this. Keep your eyes open. In regards to the end of days, Jesus said, watch, pray, and don't be deceived. These are the days that we're living. God bless you, and shalom.